Hi, welcome to Naughty Nautilus. I'm Corinne. This is my first quilting video. I also post FlossTube videos for cross stitch. So if you found me through that, welcome. If you just found me from searching quilting, also welcome. I am a relatively new quilter, I would say. I did learn to sew when I was like 6 or 7. I don't really remember if it was all hand sewing or if it was with a machine, but I've known how to use a sewing machine and the general principles of sewing since I was young. And most of the time I was sewing like Halloween costumes and random little things, not really anything substantial. I wouldn't consider anything really great either. And it had always been a goal to get back into sewing. And I got into quilting. It was kind of an interesting story. I have a friend who's a quilter, and so I was exposed to it through college and seeing her quilts. And I had always really appreciated her quilts and the art form. I just hadn't gotten into it myself. And then as I was shopping for an apartment, I wanted a mermaid blanket on my bed. So I started looking for covers. And I found a $80 duvet cover on, I think it was Wayfair at the time. This was also like 6 years ago. And I didn't want to spend $80. And I thought I could make that. And that's how I started quilting. Now, that project ended up being way more than $80. The quilt I ended up making is this one. And this is the Glam Clam by Latifa Safir. And I used a variety of fabrics for it and made it into a mermaid quilt. I used fat quarters from Joann's and a variety of yardage I actually purchased from Spoonflower. Sorry, I am trying to wrangle a big old quilt. So it is huge. It fits a king size bed. I think it's 108 or 106 by 106. It's gigantic. But you can see some of these designs here. So I bought some sea jellies from there, some space fabric, and I probably get some better up close footage, some octopus arms in there, but it's really just a scrappy quilt. But I did want to show you, you can't really see the quilting that well from there, but you can see, trying to get some good light, the way the quilting really pops on the back, which I kind of like. It's a little bit of like a secret. And then I did include a chunky binding. The way Latifa Safir writes her pattern, she allows for that. So the quilting actually does come the top does come all the way up, and all of that is covered instead of having a little bit of exposed batting. But this really made me fall in love with the chunky binding. On this quilt, it blends in a little bit more. It's got a little bit of all the colors, but I really do prefer that style of binding. Big old quilt. We're also making a mess. So that is quilt number 4. And I really didn't have any fears about curves. And I actually fell in love with it. So it's kind of my favorite style of quilting. At some point, I may go through more of a history of my quilts that are completed. I don't know my exact number of quilts that I've completed, but it's quite a few. So I've been actively quilting since late 2019, early 2020, kind of actually started getting into it before the pandemic. Like I said, I was looking at trying to get myself a fancy duvet cover. Though what held me up was partially cost, and also the sewing machine I had at the time, I had a lot of problems with, and I was trying to figure out how to solve those problems. The solution ended up being get a different machine. And once I had that, I went crazy. And also in 2020, late 2020, ended up moving into a house instead of an apartment, and I now have a whole room that I can use, as opposed to setting up on my dining room table and having to take it all down with cats. The way I have my room set up, things have places, but it's much easier to put things away when we don't want the cats in them. So that's kind of in late 2020 is when the quilting really took off. And I believe I call it my mermaid quilt, my big glam clam. Believe I finished that in 2021, maybe late 2020. It might have been finished over Christmas 2020, something like that. So that's kind of a very brief history of my quilting. I went on a journey of just trying a lot of different things. What do I like? What do I don't? So I started with some traditional patterns, but then also started exploring. And I actually find I really like designing my own designs or taking variations off them. So, and we'll see that. I'll let you know if it's a pattern from somebody or something I made up and what I'm working with. So what I'm going to show you today is sort of what I've been working on, not quite all of this year, but pretty much since like May of this year. If you watch my floss tube, you know, this year's been a little weird for me. I found out in March I was getting laid off. And so I've been allowing myself a lot of freedom to flit in and out of what I want to do, depending on my mood, because mental health is important and that's what works for me. So I was really into quilting earlier in the year and then didn't for a while. And then it's just kind of exploded in the last like 3 or 4 months. I did finish a runner. I am a chronic make a top and then let it sit for a long time. So I had a table runner, which I should have wiped up some bits off of it, but I had made this. This is the Vintage Blooms table runner. The pattern is apples and beavers. And I had this pattern. I made the Dragon Dreams baby quilt with the Vintage Blooms border for a friend 2 years ago, I think it was now. And I had used scraps to, I don't have the date written down. I used the scraps of the solids to make a table runner. I didn't have enough of the same color, so I pulled some yellow scraps, but it's basically just a long table runner. And so it needed to be finished. And so I did this earlier. I believe I did this in, I guess it was July. So I just kind of, it's not pretty. I haven't fully cleaned up the back from my quilting, but it's really just a random pieced backing. And I use my walking foot to just kind of follow the ditch on the main elements. Like I didn't go in here, but just around here. So just enough to kind of secure everything down, but nothing too crazy. I want to learn free motion quilting, but I'm also terrified. So I do a lot of straight lines. So that is this runner. Again, I still do need to kind of clip some threads and things, but that was one of my finishes of this year. And I'm happy to get it done because, again, every project done is one less on your to-do list. Another one, I said I was a chronic procrastinator. Another quilt I finished in the last couple of months is, I'm going to have to show you a picture. It is this quilt here. It is a decent size. I should have written down the size, but I didn't. The pattern is My Little Bargello. Early on in my quilting, I wanted to try a Bargello, but I didn't want to necessarily invest in a whole bunch of different cuts of fabric and a pattern and things like that. And I found this pattern on a free blog post. I'll put the link here. I'll also add it to the description. And it was a cute little Bargello. And I had a jelly roll. Actually, I had 2 miniature strip rolls. They're not really jelly rolls. They came from Joann's Fabrics. And initially I was going to just do sort of a cascading design, but I wanted to do something a little more interesting. So I found this pattern, and it turns out the pattern calls for 14 colors, and they use 2-inch strips, and the jelly roll I had 10 colors and 2.5-inch strips. And I figured I could modify it. And so I adjusted the measurements. So I did a lot of my own math. I adjusted the measurements to be proportional. So what would have been a 2, or what would have been a finished 1.5 by 1.5 in her design would be a finished 2 by 2 in mine. And while I was at it, I decided to add more segments. So if you've never made a bargello, generally you change them by 1/4 or 1/2 inch increments. And I believe her pattern maybe jumped inches, and so I added those in. It ended up expanding it quite a bit. So I ended up actually having to go back to Joann's and get 2 more of those miniature jelly rolls. But this is what my finished top looked like. And I absolutely love it. I do have it here, and I'll probably show you some more close-ups. But like, I really love the colors. And while this has 10 as opposed to her 14 in the original pattern, I think they just really go together. And I like this sort of like one brighter pink, orange, and then the blues. And and these are, again, a batik jelly roll from Joann's. I found a matching batik. This was actually in the remnants. I was just browsing and happened to find it, and it's almost identical to this fabric. It's a little bit different, but I figured it was close enough. And then I just ended up getting a 108 backing, also from Joann's, that I thought would just kind of had some of those colors. And I just did a really light quilting, again, with my walking foot. I kind of just followed some of the squares and a couple of colors. So the pink has, I tried to kind of go corner to corner, but it's a little fluid. So it's not the fanciest, but I just did that with the pink. And then there's some in sort of this purple. And then I did the similar style with blue in some of the, this is harder to do than I thought, and some of the dark ones. So you don't really see it, and it really blends into the back. But I am very happy with this. I originally made the top, I think, in probably 2022. And it took me about 2 years to finally finish it. So, and it really was just pick a backing and sit down and quilt it. And it didn't take me that long to actually get it quilted once I did it. And I'm trying to remember. Sometimes I forget to add a label. I did add a label to this one though. So that was my little bargello. And it's a very easy pattern to follow. I highly recommend, if you want to try a bargello, checking it out. You should still be able to access it. And if you can, I will post it below. And I'm sorry if my light's changing a little bit. We are having quite stormy days here in Louisiana, and I was trying to film when I had some good light, but we'll see how this works out. All right, and I have one more fully finished quilt recently, and this actually just got finished yesterday. And this was a pattern test. So I found this person doing a call for pattern testers on Reddit for this quilt. And I've never pattern tested, and I thought it'd be something fun to do. And this also came out right about the time I knew I was going to have a lot of free time. So my job ended at the end of July, and then I had some vacation time to use. So basically the whole month of August, I had nothing to do. So I figured pattern testing would be a great way to spend my time. So this one, I think I can just maybe fit it all in here, sort of. So it's a yellow submarine, and it is this small size. This pattern will actually come in 3 sizes, but I decided to test the small one. And all of the fabric is from Joann's, and I'm very happy with it. I don't want to say too much about it because it is a pattern test and it is still testing right now. And I have no idea how it's going to be by the time this video goes up. It probably still will be testing, but I just found some fun fabrics. I really fell in love with this background for water. And also, if you've ever seen Yellow Submarine from the Beatles, it's very psychedelic and crazy. And so I felt the backing or this background would be really great. And then kind of just pick my colors from there. I actually found this yellow and this cream, which I don't know if you can see that it does kind of have some swirls in it. Those I actually found in the remnants bin, and I had plenty to work with for what I needed for this quilt. So I found those and then kind of just tried to match some other colors from there that worked, but I wanted a lot of movement in the designs. The only solid is this pink, which was you just needed a scrap. And I didn't like any of the fat quarters I found, and that's what I had. And the blue, again, was another remnant, which I actually ended up using. I bought a lot of it, and I just decided to use it as the backing and as that scrap. So, and then it's just straight line quilted, again, with my walking foot, and I actually had a yellow thread that I thought would be fun. And from a distance, you can't really tell it's yellow. You can see the texture, but I like how it kind of worked with the design in general. So that's my other finish for this period of time. All right. Was that a lot? Because it's kind of a lot. There's still more. I had some top finishes and I have some things in progress. So let's start with this pattern. I'm making this quilt for a friend, and the pattern is Sugar Sand Beach by Atkinson's Design. So this is the quilt design, and it's kind of just a beachy, fun vibe going on, and it's pretty easy. And I've never worked with triangles. It does call for the Creative Grids spiderweb ruler, which I don't have, so I had to kind of figure out how to get the proper angle using my own ruler, which was kind of fun. I had to make a paper template and figure that out. So this friend knows about this quilt, so I'm not worried about showing it. The top is done, and I will have to show you the full picture here. So this is all done with fabric from Ruby Star Society. It is mostly Florida 2 by Sarah Watts. There are a few fat quarters I used from Florida 1 that I hunted down because they needed to be in the quilt. And then the background is from the Achromia line. So overall, I'm very happy with how it came out. It does need some cleaning up. And the reason this one is not done is this is going to the long armor. So I also need to purchase the backing for this quilt. But it is going to the long armor, and anything with that has got put on pause until the job situation gets sorted out. Because if you're a quilter, you know it's an expensive hobby. So we are trying to work with what we got and not spend anything we don't need to do. But this quilt is just larger than I feel comfortable with, and I'm actually planning to have the fun sea life quilting pattern on it, similar to my mermaid quilt, my Glam Clam. So I will just show you part of this as best I can. So you can see it's gray, but it's kind of textured. And then you have all those fun kind of oceany prints from the Florida 2 line. And but like the manatees here, ooh, sorry. This one was from the Florida 1. And my friend likes manatees, so we had to get some manatees in there. And I like these cranes. So I kind of bought a few extra fat quarters from that as well for this quilt. So it will get, I know which backing I'm going to use. I have to go buy it from my quilt shop. And once we get to that, it'll go to the long armor, and it's going to get a scrappy binding with leftover bits of the strips of all the fabric from this quilt. So I think it'll turn out really cute. Hopefully it will get done before the end of the year. That is the hope. So I have this quilt and another one that are waiting to go to the long armor. A lot of the other ones I'm trying to get them done myself. I'm trying to push myself, and they're mostly for me. So I don't care if they're not as pretty. Okay, and then another top finish was, it's actually this pattern here. It's the Perfect Picnic Quilt by Ruby Star Society. It's actually a free pattern, so I'll have that linked down below. But I ended up using, I didn't use Ruby Star Society fabric on it. I previously used to receive the Sew Sampler box from the Fat Quarter Shop. And in one of the boxes, we got 2 charm packs of Fisherman's Bend. And I can't remember who it's by, but I will put it here. And I thought it would make a very cute version of the Perfect Picnic Quilt. But I needed 1 more charm pack to have enough squares. So I ordered one, and I ordered some backing fabric. And then I sat for a long time in my to-do pile while I decided what other colors I was going to use, because you need a light color and a dark color, and the charm squares will function as the medium color. And the pattern's originally written for fat quarters, but it has you cut them into 5-inch squares. So you could do this scrappy, you could use any charm pack, but I did need 3, and actually I made the pattern slightly bigger just to use up the 3 charm packs. So this is what my finished top looks like. And I'll show you a close-up of a little bit more. So I'm just really in love. So I ended up using this grunge and blue. And then it's mostly Kona Snow because I have a whole bolt of it. But I think some of the squares, white squares, are not. I started cutting from scraps. So it's a little, you can't quite notice as much, but I don't care. I do intend this to be a picnic quilt, so it might get dirty, and I don't really care. But you get some of these really cute prints, and I fell in love with these fish that are kind of neons. They remind me of the 90s, which is kind of why I fell in love with it. So this top is done. I will quilt this one at home. I just need binding fabric for it, and I've decided I need to get more of this grunge. I think that'll make a nice frame for this quilt. And I've already got the backing for that. It's getting this fish print on the back. So I think it'll be a really cute quilt. It'll be good for when it'll probably be more of a festival quilt than a picnic, where we will go and I can lay it out and we can sit on a blanket instead of standing around at a festival. So if you've never been to South Louisiana, they like their festivals. All right, so the other top that I finished, I have to grab. Just kidding, it's right in front of me. So it's sort of a 2-part pattern. So when I first started quilting, I learned a lot from YouTube, and I watched a lot of Donna Jordan's from Jordan Fabrics, and I really like this quilt double dipping. And now I know it's kind of a gray area between buying a pattern and kind of copying it yourself, and this may be a morally gray area here. I used the technique she demonstrated to basically make 2 quilts, and it's strip piecing, and it's very easy to figure out which order you put them in. And then I used a strip tube ruler and just cut them into blocks. So I got 2 different styles of blocks, and I have 2 quilts from that. Now I cut all of these blocks in July of 2022. And these particular ones have been sitting until this year, when I just thought about this quilt and I really wanted to sew it. I thought about how I wanted to set all of these blocks. So I call this my double dipping 2 quilt because it's the second one. And this is what it looks like. It is made with a Kona cotton roll up I bought from Joann's. It's a half roll, so it's not as big as your standard roll with 40 to 42. I think this had maybe 24 strips, and it was in the colorway Melon Ball, which again is older. I haven't been able to find it. And then I ended up using a black Kona cotton jelly roll in my initial strips, and then just black Kona cotton for the setting of this quilt. And again, I have a whole bolt of black. A couple years ago, just bought a bolt of black and a bolt of white so I can make tops. And I still have a little bit of it, but I'm probably going to run out soon. So I did finish this top in this setting in July. Let's see. I'm looking at my date. It was the middle of July, on the 13th and 14th. I sewed all these together, and I just I was going for a certain look. I wanted to expand as you went out. And so I assembled the center with some sashing, and I said, okay, now how much do I want to expand that? And framed it in, and then had to figure out the math for all the spacing in between. So it was a lot of figuring out the math as I went, which for me was relaxing. Maybe weird. I recognize that. But I'm very happy with how this quilt turned out, other than it was meant to be the sister quilt and about the same size, and it's quite a bit bigger. I think it's 70 or 72 by 72, so it's a big quilt. I do need some backing for it, and I don't know what I'm going to do with it. So for right now, it's going to sit until I figure out what I'm going to back it with. And then probably if I have to purchase something, it's going to wait until we're sure we have an income again. I just don't want to spend money I don't need to spend right now. It's not that I'm short on cash. It's just I can't justify going and spending, $50, $60 on fabric when I have plenty of stuff to work on. We're still going through this list. I still got more to do too. So I don't need it yet. So that is what I've done double dipping number 2. So let's jump to double dipping number 1. This one's sort of weird and an in progress stage. So this one I had assembled almost immediately after cutting all of those blocks. So back in, so I have written down, I finished the top in December. On New Year's Eve, December 2022, and I started it in July. I can't tell you why it took me that long to get it assembled, but this is what the top looks like. And I purchased a beautiful ombre pink backing. It was a 108, and it sat for a long time from when I purchased it. And I finally got around to quilting it. And I decided this was the quilts I was going to try variegated thread on. It's black. It's going to show up. So imperfect quilting will show up. And I was okay with that. This is only going to me. Like, it's going to sit in my house. It's going to collect cat hair anyways. So who cares? So I had worked on quilting it, but I actually ran out. I bought a small spool of my thread, and I actually ran out in the middle, or I was very nearly done. You can see right here, I ran out of my thread in the middle of a line. So I've got to rip all that out. But you can see I'm just there's 2 sets of boxes kind of following the quilting, but I'm really happy with, and again, I don't know how well this is turning out. My light's kind of going bad, but you can kind of see the different colors, and you can see that it's not perfectly straight. I am really eyeballing it, and that's fine for me. So this has been sitting while I ordered new thread. This is one of the first things I tried to finish, and you can see I'm trying out black batting. Jury's out, but I have that beautiful ombre where it's darker here and lighter here. And this one's more of a 60 by 60 quilt, so I did not use all of that ombre. But we finally got our new thread. We've got a big spool this time. I plan to use this to finish this quilt, and I will do the other double dipping when it comes time. So this is actually my next one to be finished, because it literally needs like maybe an hour of quilting left, and then binding and a label, and it'll be done. So that's the next task. All right, and I have three more quilts that I have worked on since then. I guess I'll talk about the elephant in the room. This one. I figured I should have something pretty up in the background. And this is it's just a Fons and Porter design wall that's hanging on some nails over my closet because this is really the only space I have. I do have plans to try to get something that's a little bit bigger, but also that rolls up, whether it be something I build or convert a projector screen. It depends on what's available to me. This is the 30-something sampler quilt. And this is from the book Wonderful Curves. And this is, I always forget the name of this because I don't actually have it. So Kind of Wonderful. And they have the Wonder Curve ruler. So this book uses that ruler. I don't have it. I have invested in Latifah Saphir's Clammy. And I have 4 of the 6 shapes with the intention of getting the 2 I don't have. And I don't want to have a million different rulers, so I try to use what I had. But I really love the different blocks in here and the way they present them and the modifications you can make. Each one you look at has, how you set it up. They give you like a coloring block, and then they give you alternatives you can do. So, and every one of them has that. And then they have what's called the 30-something sampler block. And I really wanted to make a sampler quilt. And so in this quilt, 9 blocks are exactly as described, and the rest of the blocks are made of modifications of the rest of them. So I am approaching this 1 block at a time. And I started with the 9 unmodified blocks. So that is what you see behind me. And we'll go through them one by one. But the rules of this quilt, where I'm only using Ruby Star Society fabric. I do get the quarterly Ruby Star Society fat quarter bundle from the Fat Quarter shop. So 4 times a year, I get 12 fat quarters. I get a coordinating thread and a pattern, and I've been doing that for about 2 years, and I really haven't done much with the fabric, so I had a bunch of it. And I figured if it's all Ruby Star Society, it can all go in the same quilt. So some of these are made with 1 bundle, and some are made with fabric from multiple. It really just depends on what I feel like that day. I decide I'm going to do this block, and I pull up my box. It is a chaotic box, which I don't know where it is right now. It's just full of fabric, and I just pull what I need and I cut. And I do have to modify the finished blocks on this pattern, come out to 4 inches finished. And with my ruler, my curve ruler, they come out to 4.5. And so these blocks are slightly larger, which means the quilt will be slightly larger, but that's fine for me. It is something to keep myself busy. And I actually have been really enjoying the process. So let's go through these blocks and I'll show them to you. So this is, they call it the bungalow block. And I can tell you when I made this, I found this fabric and I said that needs to be a sky. And you know what? I want a blue house. And then I thought, unicorns and moons and stuff for a door, sure. And then we did this psychedelic curtains, and I kind of just pick and kind of say, okay, what can we use? And then for the chimney up here, I looked for a small scrap that was kind of the right color. And it's a little bit wild, but I actually, I really like it. And I think when you get it in there with all of the other fabrics, it works. This one here is a nice little flower block. So making orange peels. And again, one of the keys with this one was I decided to swap the colors. Here, use the same ones. I think the original pattern had 2 different colors and like 2 different centers, but I just swapped them. And the other thing is it had it all one background. But if you look closely, it's actually 2 different background colors because you needed a half yard or they, you know, some more than that, and I couldn't get all my cuts out of one fat quarter, so I found two fat quarters that look very similar, and you can't really tell from far away. And so it's been kind of fun to challenge my brain in that way. This one was a fun and simple block. This one actually happens to be all Florida too. I had bought a giant fat quarter bundle and I did not use it all in that quilt for my friend. So whatever was left got thrown into this box. And again, just basically these are all quarter circles, just in opposite colorways, and then some half square triangles. It was actually really easy to put together, and I'm very happy. And yes, I am very particular and was trying to make sure my birds were right side up, and I'm very careful when I cut to try to do that. Unfortunately, I actually messed this up. I wanted this fabric in here, and when I realized it, my cutting mistake, I couldn't fix it. I didn't have enough fabric, so we rolled with it. So unfortunately, you can't see it, but this, you can maybe just barely see it right there. Right there. That's an alligator face, and here's his eye. And I wanted the alligators to show, and it didn't work, but I have a little bit more of the fabric, so we're going to try to make it work in a different block. I want to apologize. My light is going, and I am trying to work and trying to get you lit as well as I can, but if I don't do this now, I probably won't get it done for another couple of weeks. So this is my bird block. Again, I kind of just picked fabrics. I was looking through and I really liked this. It's a metallic with roses, and I thought it would just be a really pretty bird. So we went ahead, and fun story about this one. There's this block here is a very particular way you make it. And so you make a half square triangle, and then you basically make another half square triangle using this fabric. And they have you do it two at a time. So I actually made two of these, and they face opposite directions. And I cut one wrong, trying to trim it down. And so like my point was like really off on this side. And the bird was originally supposed to be facing the other way. And I was like, I don't want to redo that whole thing. The bird's just going to face the other way. And really all I had to do was flip it and make sure this beak part got put on the right angle. And that's kind of what I'm enjoying about this quilt, is that if I want to make changes or I mess up and there's a way to just flip it, I can do it. This one is probably my least favorite block that I've done, and it's mostly because assembly was difficult. So I can do a quarter circle block like this very easily. I know how to do this. It's very simple. But they have these blocks where you basically have this quarter circle and this additional cut, and they walk you through how to do it with their ruler. I don't have the ruler, so I had to figure it out for myself. So there were a lot of mistakes, which led to having to re-sew things. And so you'll see that like I ended up not having quite enough fabric, so I had to like piece things together. And the same thing down here, it wasn't quite the right length going on, so I ended up having to piece it. So this is my not well done. This was the first time doing those, and you can see that the top of this basket is really far and off, and I learned a lot doing this one. But it's not my least favorite because of the colors. It's because it was a pain in the butt, and I had to rip things out and re-sew them and try to figure out how to fill gaps and the like. So it was more of a frustrating one. Also, this is why you shouldn't do complicated things late. I think I was working on it late, and I was getting frustrated and making mistakes. And I ended up putting it away and coming back to it the next day to figure it out. But so that was my basket. And this is one too that I changed. They had opposite this side and this side being one color, and then kind of a checkerboard, and I just didn't want to do that. I didn't like that look, so I just put this kind of psychedelic yellow in the middle, so it's kind of glowing. This is another block that got a little creative. It's like a starburst or something like that, and you'll see that out here there's two different fabrics going on because I didn't have enough of this one to fill these spaces, but I think you really can't tell that much. And again, once it gets in the whole quilt, it's not going to matter. I also failed a bit at trying to get my directional fabrics going the right way in this one. So we're learning a little bit, but I do actually like the overall effect. And there's some cool modifications on this block in the book, which I think would be fun to kind of play around with on its own quilt. And you can see too, this was the first time cutting some of those different angles. So you can see like here, it doesn't line up to a point. I don't care in this case. If I made it now, I might get a better point. I think that one's almost perfect. But I am not a perfect points quilter. Like, you get what you get with me. This block was a lot of fun for me. Again, this one started with, I want to use this yellow. I want these suns, and what can I do with it? And I had bits of this fabric here. Scrap bits. This is more of that. This was on the roof of the house, and it's also in that last block I showed you. Kind of, oh, I have enough, let me cut these. And I actually did have to piece one of these. If you look very closely, there's a seam there and a seam there just to get that one last piece in there. So, and I kind of just picked some fabrics from there. It may or may not work for you. It's kind of loud with the pink and the yellow, but I'm pretty happy with it. Again, we're all going in a crazy quilt. And this is really the epitome of like, I just wanted to use that fabric. I was like, yellow, we're on yellow, what goes with it? And then there's a pink with suns. It's the same print, just different colorway. And I said, okay, let's use that and let's build pinks from there. This is, I think, my favorite block. One, the name is fun. It's called Whirligig. And two, I feel like it looks like a little fish vortex in the middle. I also like the use of color. So this probably should be like more of a medium, but I would say it's a little bit more of a neutral, kind of encased. And I think all of these fabrics are from Koi Pond, which is an older Sarah Watts. Again, I got it in one of those fat quarter thing bundles, quarterly thingamabob, whatever. And this one was fun, but I did have to make some modifications. Again, I made a wrong cut with these angles, and so I had to adjust. So really, the biggest difference in this block is the way these are, they should have been angled. I should have cut the other direction, and this swirl would be going a different way, but I think you really can't tell in this block. But I really like this one. Again, a learning experience, trying to modify a pattern to the tools I own instead of getting a new tool. And actually, I would consider making a quilt with more of these and also potentially expanding it. This was made with the 8-inch clammy, and I could make it with a 16-inch, or I have the 24 as well. And basically, you know, these finish at 4 inches with the 8-inch. A 16-inch would finish at 8 inches. The 24-inch would finish at 12 inches. So you could make like one big baby quilt with this and like slap a border on it and call it a day. So I think it would be fun to do that. Last block, which ironically is actually the first one I made. And this is all in the Florida 2 line. Again, I just decided I wanted to use this pink. And I said, okay, I need sort of a dark and a medium to add that effect. I don't know how effective it was. And like some sort of neutral. So again, I went with the sandpipers. And I think I'm actually that way, the right side up. And that's how I intend to put it in the quilt, to get these patterns going in the right direction. And I kind of tried, this again is that alligator print. So there's some more of it in here. I think that's that one. And this one have a bit of the alligator in it. And I tried to get them upright. When you're making half square triangles and these curved outer pieces to the orange peels, it's not always going to work for you. So with that quilt, those are the 9 as described in the book blocks. We start getting more complicated in there. And I did those over like 4 or 5 days. I just really went ham on getting those quilt blocks together. And then I decided to put them away. This is intended as sort of a long-term project. I am still part of that quarterly club. I am still getting fabric. I have not used everything yet, but we're working through it. So I didn't intend to kind of blast through it. So we will work on it as we go. And the next block is, like I said, a modified block. So we will be working on it there. And it's actually going to be this block here that we are doing. So I think I've picked my fabrics for it, and I'm probably going to start work on it next week. But as you can see, those blocks I've made end up in all these different places. So they're going to be a chaos of colors, but I like it. So that's my sampler quilt. So you'll probably see it again as I make more blocks. I won't show you all the blocks every time. I'll just show you what I did work on. This is my one and only English paper piecing pattern. Sorry, one of my cats has decided to join me and is staring at me. So this is The Rooster by Violet Craft. And sorry about that reflection. This is, I wanted to try it, but I didn't want to do something large. So this finishes 20 by 20. So it's not very large, and I've been working on it. I started this, oh, do I have it written down? In December of 2022, and it is almost all scraps. And then I went and bought a few fat quarters. The one thing I've learned about my quilting is reds and oranges are not something I gravitate to when I buy randomly. I have a lot of blues, and I had a lot of neutrals. I had made a quilt with some chicken fabric that I had a lot of, and I have like grays and stuff like that. So I ended up going and buying a few fat quarters to fill in some of these colors based on the recommendations of the pattern. And this came with all of the pieces. And so I've worked on this on and off, but I have not been very diligent. But the other day, this almost didn't make it. The other day I just was sitting there and I didn't want to cross stitch, but I wanted to do something, so I worked on this. So this is where we are, and I do have my Sew Tight hanging on it. But so I had done this head up here, and this is starting to be the backgrounds. I'm using grays. I have some, that's a Stonehenge leftover jelly rolls from a log cabin I made. That's a chicken fabric, which you can't see. That's more of it. And so those are kind of filling in the backgrounds, and then the rest of it will just be hexagons. I have prepped all my pieces but those hexagons, so only the ones that are directly around the rooster will be there. But it's a real mix. There's batiks in here, there's wovens, and it is not the most beautiful stitching. I didn't want to get a million different threads, so it's all gray thread. And you can see it in places and you can't in others, but it's a learning experience. I don't know if I will ever do another project after this. It's kind of hit or miss. My brain says I should like it because I like cross stitching, but this just had not appealed to me as much. So I don't know. There is one pattern I've been eyeing on Etsy with some butterflies that's really beautiful, but I don't know if I'll do it. I have to finish this guy first, and it'll probably turn into a wall hanging and will be gifted to my boyfriend's mom. She likes chickens and quilting, and I thought she would appreciate it. So that was part of the reason for the choice of the pattern, is that I would have a place for it to go, because I wasn't sure that I would want to display something like this. So she would hang it up. But I'm actually really happy with how it's turning out, and maybe I can push to do this. This is like the last row of the rooster's body, and then there's the tail, and then it's all of the hexagons. So yeah, we're like in here, like I'm stitching that piece on. So we have like this much more to go, and like his little legs and all of this will get done, and then I will tackle the tail. And then it's just really I have to make these hexagons. So I have all the fabric ready to go. I just didn't prep them ahead of time, but I did get really good progress like last week on this pattern. We are almost done. Sorry, again, the cat is like, why do you have all this stuff around? Maybe he'll make an appearance, or he's just going to supervise. You will see him at the end of the video though. So in my wanting to quilt journey, I've always wanted to make a Storm at Sea, or I particularly like the one with the snail tail inside of it. And I decided I wanted to do this with scraps. So I have a lot of random size little bits. When I was first starting and trying to manage scraps, somebody says, oh, cut them into usable sizes. And I cut just about every size in like triangles. And I've not done anything with these. And I was like, I bet I can use these in some sort of scrappy thing. And so the idea of, at the right scale, I could use up some of these fabrics, which, you know, you can see that's from my Glam Clam mermaid blanket. That's also from it. So it's a lot of purples and greens and blues in these sizes. I have since stopped cutting those sizes, but I'm trying to use what I have. So, and the idea was to work on this as we go. I also, in one of my Sew Sampler boxes, got their Snail Trail foundation paper. So I figure this is going to be my foundation paper piecing project. I've done a little bit of it, just trying it out, but they give you your papers and your orders to do it. So I'm using this for the snail trail parts, and I found some compatible sizes for the other blocks. And so this is kind of what we're imitating. I found this pattern online, again, a little bit of a gray area, where I'm really using this as inspiration, mostly for the way they've colored it. A lot of times, like with these diamonds, the diamonds are the background and the outer parts are the color. So this is my sort of inspiration, but I'm not using their pattern. I'm using all the sizes that I've calculated. And so there's actually a website, free blog post for the Storm at Sea block variation, and I will share that link down below. But they had this design, and they give you all of the paper piecing patterns for it. So what I did is I took the diamond shape and this square and square. I'm not doing this one because that's going to be the snail trail, and I was able to print those pieces of paper. So I have, and these are just printed on newsprint, my own paper piecing patterns. And I went and looked through all my scraps one day and sorted them out. And then I cut Kona Cotton Snow as my background. And I have done very few of these. I did one diamond in which I realized that I may have cut my rectangles a little small. I'm going to reevaluate. I may or may not use this particular block. If I can sneak that in and get that in the seam allowance, maybe we're fine, maybe we're not. But we are trying it out, and I do still have the paper in there. And then I basically made several of these blocks, and I'm really just picking colors that I want. Like I say, okay, I want to use this green. What looks good with it in these triangles? So it is really random, and basically that's not the box. This is the box. I have a Tupperware with all of my pieces. I think I am using squares because, again, I'm using what I have that fits. And so there is a little bit of waste with these, but why would I cut that small of a square? I think this is 1.5 inches, maybe. Like, I'm not going to make a postage stamp quilt. I don't know why I did this. So this is my way of using up these scraps. So basically I can sit down with this, with my papers, and sew a few as I feel like it. And I have that for all of my shapes. I think my snail trail ones is like 2 Tupperwares that I have. So that is the last of my current works in progress. And if you're curious, a lot of times when I plan sort of a quilt on my own, this is the way I do it. And in this case, I'm adding my reference material, sort of have my process for figuring everything out. I make myself a cutting list. This was sort of a written out, and then I made myself a table, and you can see I made notes as I go. And so that's kind of how my brain works with any of these that I kind of do on my own. I essentially write my own. And a lot of times the sewing parts like sew together. Like I don't write it out. It's not very detailed. I would not think anyone else can read my patterns. So yeah, so that's things I've worked on lately. I have quite a few things in the works. This video is also turning out way longer than I thought it was going to be. I was like, I'll film this real quick. So on my to-do list, I want to finish both of those double dipping quilts. Again, I don't know what I'm doing for the backing yet on the second one. If I decide to just use some Kona cotton, or I might be able to piece together some leftover pieces of other backings, then maybe I will do this. But I would like to get those completely finished and bound. I want to make some more blocks for both the Snail Trail Storm at Sea and this one here. I want to do at least one. I'm kind of planning on doing it next week. I want to try to get a few things done before that. And I may or may not be painting cabinets in the house next week. So, yeah. I have no plans to really start anything. Maybe. Oh, I do have I take that back. There's 3 or 4 things I may start. When I wrote this, I don't know that I didn't look at it again before I started this, so I might change this, but so we'll talk about those. I have a couple more quilt tops. I have another quilt top I finished a while ago that needs to go to the long armor. I finally found backing for it on sale. This is my one exception to buying fabric, because when it's like 60% off, you're gonna buy it. Especially I've been trying to figure out what backing I want for this quilt for like over a year now. So I have that. And then I have 2 additional tops that I haven't shown you. I'm gonna show you one right now. The other one, I won't show you it unless I get to it, but this is a disappearing 9 patch I made for my sister's dog. I have made one already and very similar. I cut the 9 patch, or I flipped the 9 patch differently, but same. She actually has 3 corgis now, but when I started this project, she just had 2, and I finished one and sent it to her, and this one's been sitting for like a year and a half. And so I want to finish this. I have everything for it. I just need to do it. And I've been waiting on figuring out how to quilt it. So this is like the immediate, you need to finish this. As soon as I finish the one that's partially quilted, this is next. And then as I was doing this, she went and got a 3rd dog. So I can't have 2 dogs having a quilt and one not. So the fabric all came from, well, the prints came from Spoonflower, but the solids are Kona cottons. And so I went and ordered another yard. So what I did is a fill a yard. So it's half a yard of one fabric and half a yard of the other. So this is the other fabric, one design, and then this is the other print. So this is getting a completely different setting. It's not going to be a 9 patch, a disappearing 9 patch. It's going to be something different. I didn't realize the one corgi print was so large, and so I don't really want to cut it up. And this will be my 4th quilt for a corgi. I made another one and sent it to a friend who has a corgi. So that one, this is the one that may or may not be a start. I did actually end up ordering fabric for this one too. I cheated, but I'm going to use backing that I already have. So I just needed something to frame this in, and I have black and white, and neither one felt right for this. So that is been ordered, but not in. So when that comes in, I will probably do a start to finish on this. And and try to get both of those quilts done and sent to my sister. Because, yeah, actually, she's also going to be having a baby soon. So I've got a baby quilt in my future. I haven't figured that out yet. Okay, so that's that. And then if I'm feeling really ambitious, I might finish the other quilt top as well that I plan to quilt at home. I have everything for it. I just haven't sat down to do it. Again, I get a bit of decision paralysis when it comes to how to quilt it. So it might just get lines. That's my new favorite right now. So the only other thing, I have fabric for a few other quilts that I've had sitting around, and they're sort of, once I get through these projects, except for the Storm at Sea and the sampler quilt, those are meant to be long-term projects. I will potentially start working on those as well. There's one project I think I want a different background for, so it's going to sit lower on the list until I can purchase that. But I have a few others that I could do, and I'm considering starting some other kind of scrap quilt to use up what I have. I do process my scraps, and I have various size strips, and then I have specifically 2.5-inch strips, and then I cut 5-inch squares and 10-inch squares. And the random sizes, not the 2.5-inch strips, will probably go in some sort of string quilt. I'm thinking about it. They're getting a little full in that container, and I might just use black or white. I have some other random fabrics. I used to have a real problem with the remnant sections at Joann's, and so I have some random fabrics that I've never used that might get cut up or might be used in it. Just kind of make a real scrappy, crazy quilt. But that and my 5-inch squares are getting kind of full as well, especially the blue, greens, and purples. I buy them a lot. So those may or may not be in the future. I give myself permission to start things with scraps, but part of my problem too is I try to limit my projects, and I have a certain number of containers for them, and they're all full right now. So I need to empty those containers before I can really start new things. And I had haul written down, but I went through it all. I bought more of this thread to finish that quilt. I bought all the fabric and everything for the yellow submarine quilts. I didn't have, the only thing that came from my stash was the pink. Everything else was I needed to purchase, which was relatively inexpensive because they were, as a small quilt, small cuts, and I got some of them from the remnants bin. So they were extra discounted. So, that was a lot. So that's the haul. And we talked plans, and I will give a very brief life update. If you watch my FlossTube video, you've already heard most of this, unless I come up with something new, because I've completely forgotten what I said an hour ago. Actually, it was over an hour ago. This video is long. At least filming it's long. Hopefully it won't be so long for you. But thank you so much for coming and watching my quilting video, if you've already watched my FlossTube video. And I really do appreciate you all. As somebody who's just trying to try things out and see how it's going and got thrown a massive curveball, I do really appreciate the love and support I have gotten, and I will try to be much better. If you haven't, I'm going to talk about some life stuff now, and hopefully it won't be too much longer. So yes, I was working in a research lab on marine mammals and genetics, and my position was funded through a grant, and the grant ran out, so there was no money for my job. So I've been laid off, and I have been dealing with trying to find a job, trying to get everything sorted, and mental health. And so I don't want to get too much into it, but I have been on a mental health journey through most of my life, and I learned how to manage it. And with that, I ebb and flow with what I like to do. So hence why you see a lot of quilting right now, but I might have a whole bunch of stuff in the next video. I might have barely anything. So you never know. I might get really into crochet again. I mean, crochet was my first like real hobby, and I haven't done it in a long time, but I might come back to it. I never know. But with life, it's been professionally stressful, but good. I mean, everything was sorted. There's no animosity with my last job or anything like that. We are job hunting, and we are mostly just trying to keep busy. I have been doing a lot of things around the house. Things that have been on the house to-do list for a very long time, but just haven't gotten to, because my weekend would be, oh, do I want to do this house thing, or do I want to sew, or do we want to go out with people? So I have been working on that. We tried to remove wallpaper in a bathroom and was defeated by wallpaper and had to call professionals, but now my bathroom is painted and has a nice new mirror and all of that. They still do need to paint the cabinets, but I have been working on a variety of things like that in our house. I cleaned and reorganized my sewing room / office. I do use the space for both. And yeah, and you know, always keeping the kitties company and happy, because it's really all about keeping them happy. I don't know that I have much else in terms of a life update. It's a little weird to do this on a first video, but if you've seen my floss tube, you know a little bit of this, and it kind of helps put things in context for you. So yeah, with that, I want to thank you for checking me out. I hope to see you guys again. Hopefully I will share some people that I like to watch. I flip through a lot of videos in a day, and I can't always keep track of who I watch. I do like watching tutorials because I just like learning. But there are a few QuiltTube, is that what we're saying? People who share videos in this kind of format that I do like to watch. I will watch Fiber Arts Amy when I have time. Her videos tend to be very long. They're also very sporadic, so you never know when I'm going to have the time to watch her long videos, depending on when they come out. I do also watch Pages and Stitches, both her floss tube and her quilting videos. And I do really like both of what they do, although it can be very different as well. I like seeing what people do that's different. I have a very distinctive style that I like. This is my love right now, is all these crazy curves, and that's where I'm at. A lot of the quilts I have planned in the near future are curved in some way. And as I've worked through this book and done some of these patterns, these blocks, I keep thinking, how can I make it bigger? How can I make it smaller? What can I do? Which ones can I pick? And how can I modify to make something really cool? So that's just kind of where I am in quilting. I'm less of a traditional patchwork kind of person. And that's fine. If that's what you're into, that's what you're into. Like, this is an art form and a hobby, and you should do what you like, not what people think you should do. Like, really, that's what any of these hobbies are about, is doing what you like. And that's what I do. So that was a bit of a rant, and I apologize if you didn't like it. If you did, cool. I will rant and I will forget what I was saying. But thank you so much for checking out my quilting video today. I hope to see you again in the future, and hopefully it won't be a really long time until I see you. And if you're wanting to see which kitty was visiting me, you're going to see him right now. Bye.